Like I said earlier, it wouldn't be a KBMP meeting without a few little technical glitches.
Okay, resume. So I'm Erich Yokel with the Scott River Watershed Council. So following the objectives of using the water quality monitoring to help us direct on the designs, one of the large endeavors that we've taken part in the last couple of years is developing a hydrogeomorphic model for the Scott River to help us understand the existing conditions and look for restoration. Additionally to that, a long-standing project that's been done is the Scott Valley Integrated Hydrologic Model led by UC Davis and Larry Walker Associates. The work that we've been doing is helping collaborate and calibrate that model. Ultimately, we're really trying to work with all these other collaborators in the basin to understand hydrology, water quality, and the importance of the groundwater surface water interactions, with a focus that we've had in the last decade plus in the severely impaired tailings reach of the Scott, and we'll look at that later in the project. And also, we've had the ability to install several restoration projects with a focus on restoring the coho salmon population in the Scott River. So utilizing this water quality to monitor the effectiveness and the conditions of existing restoration projects. No, this isn't gonna. No, this. I'm sorry. It's not moving forward. No, and I mean, I'm there now, and now it's. I think she was right. It wasn't on the screen. Okay, so here's an example. This photo is one of the restoration projects that we installed in 2024. It was a constructed project where we were making fish habitat for juvenile coho salmon, connecting an area in the tailings to Sugar Creek, which you can see in the background. So to just use this as an example of some of the more in-depth water quality that we're collecting includes temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, turbidity, conductivity, and water surface elevation in these areas that we've created specifically to support juvenile coho salmon. Almost all of the water quality data that and hydrology data that we collect is continuous 15-minute data. We have currently 229 water surface elevation monitoring stations and 29 discharge stations, having over 250 stations that are collecting 15-minute data. A lot of these stations, all these stations really collect multiple parameters. The discharge stations collect both stage and temperature, leading us to millions of data points. And that is kind of one of the challenges that we have had as a small organization, fundamentally keeping up with this immense amount of data that we have been collecting. I just wanted to step back a few decades, actually. In the early 2000s, the Scott River Watershed Council started really wanting to embark on developing the water balance. We had a relative paucity of data for the Scott. We had the snow courses, some precipitation stations for the precipitation and snow that was coming in. We had the USGS gauge, which we were going to speak to for the discharges coming out. But outside of that, the whole watershed was kind of a black box of what was happening. So Watershed Council worked with Mike Diaz in the early 2000s. He developed a couple of these seminal papers that have helped really guide us in our expansion of our monitoring of hydrology with the hope of developing a more refined water balance. So here's kind of where we were then and where we are now. Like I mentioned, the fundamental data point that we have, longest standing, is the USGS gauge that is below the Scott Valley. It was established in 1941. So we have 85, 86 year data set. And then remarkably, don't push that button. In March of this year, the USGS gauge established another gauge just at Fort Jones. So we have an additional, and that gauge site was actually one of the sites that Dr. Diaz recommended 20 plus years ago to have gauging. Additionally to the USGS presence, Department of Water Resources has operated 5 gauges on major tributaries since the early 2000s. All of these gauges are in the bottom, relative bottom of the tributaries. They were established by DWR fundamentally to monitor flows for their water mastering services, and they're looking at significantly impaired flows due to the surface water rights in the Scott. And then currently, SRWC and the QBIR effort consists of 27 additional stations that are illustrated by these yellow dots. We relatively evenly sprinkled through. Some of these stations were established 20 plus years ago by the RCD, looking at unimpaired or full natural flows in major tributaries like Shackleford Creek, Mill Creek, Etna Creek, and then the other stations are looking at flows that are in some critical locations. So here's a kind of an example of how we both utilized the discharge monitoring to help collect data for a site that was actually above all diversions. And also this site helped us assist the city of Etna, who has a significant water diversion off Etna Creek, monitor the flows in Etna Creek during the drought year of 2020 to help assist with their voluntary water conservation plan. So in 2020, we first established kind of a temporary continuous discharge station and rated it. And then in 2023, we converted that discharge station to a real-time station. So here's some visualization of the data. It's very similar to what Randy was showing from the Crook Tribe water quality. The platform we use, this station collects both flow, calculated flow temperature, but also has dissolved oxygen and some of those other water quality parameters. And then I just had a really quick touching on the development of the rating curve. In the past, we've only had the ability to, because we were using flow trackers and had to wade in order to get discharge measurements. So we weren't able to measure those really high flows of the runoff. Thanks to this collaborative effort with QBIR, we were able to acquire a ADCP devices, and that allowed us to get these higher runoff flows that a lot of the engineers and other people are very interested in seeing those winter flows. Again, another thing that we've been able to do with these real-time stations is integrate the discharge station with a precipitation station, a tipping bucket. And here just shows some, I think, kind of some cool visualizations of the effects of precipitation, which is in the column graphs to flow and stage in various tributaries of the Scott River. And this is a little digression that I put together recently. We're looking at 2026, I think, as most people here know, is a challenging year. And I didn't really feel in winter that it was going to be as challenging as it turned out to be. And here's a couple examples of those long-term data sets that we have in the Scott River. The first one, this is the longest term data set we have, is the, at the Ranger Station in Fort Jones. The Forest Service has been collecting monthly accumulated precipitation since 1937, so over 90 years. And then another long-term data set, in addition to the USGS gauge, is the snowpack surveys that have been done now largely by the Forest Service. Swampy John snowpack survey that I chose here, it's a snow course in the Yreka Creek watershed. It's been measured since 1951, so 76 years. These figures just show representative drought years with the driest ranking, something I came up with. The driest ranking, number 1, means it's the driest year in the period of record. And you can see, as we all know, 1977 precipitation-wise was the driest year we have. 2026 wasn't the driest year, it was 26. It's in the, top quartile dry. But if you look at the snowpack in the driest ranking, 1977 for snowpack, it was only 19th driest. So we didn't have much rain in 77, we still had snow. 2026, we had no snow, as we did in 2015. So 2026 was an interesting year where we had precipitation, but we had no snow on April 1st. What I'm representing over here on the right of the screen is the average daily discharge at the USGS gauge for some representative years. 2025 I chose as the average year, and then in 2026 I used that kind of thick orange line. The 2014 is red, and you can see that 2026 is really tracking during the worst of the drought years. And my kind of conclusion from this is if the lack of April 1st snow really was the main driving force and that drove no late spring flow. So, and here's a couple examples of project-based use of this discharge data. So we've been working on a relatively large reach scale with TNC project on Mid-French Creek, and there's 3 discharge stations that were established there, continuous discharge stations, one at the top of the reach at the bottom of the map, one at the bottom of the reach at the top of the map, and one in the middle of the reach. What we have here is there's actually a complex side channel network on the west of the main channel, and we've seen this side channel network support a significant amount of adult and juvenile salmon. And we utilize these 3 stations and the station in the middle that does not have the discharge going into that complex to try to model or estimate the amount of flow that's going through that complex supporting this fishery. And then we're able to give that empirical data to the designers for this project to utilize, we hope, accurate empirical discharge data to help design features that will mimic those existing features that are supporting the target species. Here's just another example of what I spoke to using the Scott River data at the USGS gauge. This is French Creek data from 2025 and 2026 at that reach that I showed previously. And here on the right, the fundamental take home is that this year we're looking at flows that are 8 to 6 weeks earlier than flows that we saw last year in a quote unquote average to above average water year. So again, not good for all the ecological services that depend on this flow. So I'm going to change gears here and talk to another large component of the monitoring program the Watershed Council has done, and that's water surface elevation monitoring. And this is just an example of one of the other animals that we're extremely interested in the importance of in beaver. And this shows how the creation of a beaver dam it significantly increased the water surface elevation in French Creek during a drought year of 2021. And in addition, as we know, to that increase in water surface elevation, you also have a significant increase in volume of habitat for the juvenile fish to use year-round. And then going back to what I mentioned earlier, this Scott River Tailings Reach, it's approximately a 5-mile reach that was significantly altered by the Yuba Dredge. As you can see here, we're gonna have a presentation next from the York tribe, and it's also gonna take place in this setting. But the Watershed Council in 2014 put the first BDAs into the bottom of Sugar Creek and increased the water surface elevation. From there, we expanded our water surface elevation network to the current 45 plus stations, and additionally put discharge stations within this reach. So trying to look at that interaction between water surface in the groundwater and the surface water. And then that data allowed, this is some exhibits from Stillwater Sciences that they put together that's fundamentally showing the hydraulic gradients or the differences in water surface elevation in the tailings reach during various environmental conditions. And these are really critical for helping us try to understand how the water is functioning in this highly modified system. So when we decide that we want to come in and create some habitat like we did with that Sugar Creek refugia habitat, we don't go and make things worse, fundamentally. And then finally, on the water surface elevation, here's another example from that Mid-French Creek project, where we were really interested because TNC, who owns the property to the east of French Creek on this map, was really interested in expanding the floodplain, expanding the channel of French Creek into that area. So we wanted to know where the water surface, the groundwater water table was there. So we established a series of transects. And then here's just a LiDAR representative of the topography of one transect. And here's some data. But having that empirical data, again, really helps the designers be able to design things with real world data. And I'm a little over time, but thank you. Yeah. Sorry about that technical. That was...
Questions for Erich?
Yes. Good job.
Kind of a data question. I've worked with the QVIR nutrient samples from the East Fork, South Fork. Oh, I've worked with the QVIR nutrient data from 4 different tribs in the Scott Valley. Do you have any more nutrient data that's correlated with those gauging stations?
I actually, we're not collecting any nutrient data. This is kind of, so that's a question for Sarah. And
Where does
yeah.
CDWR?
Not to my knowledge. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I just had one question, Erich. So, sorry, air temperatures in the spring impacting that snowpack. I'm just wondering if you happen to look at any air temperatures over time, and maybe, you know, the same kind of table you put together with snowpack and precip, maybe an air temp might also show something.
Yeah, you're completely right, Crystal. I have not done that analysis yet. Charna has mentioned the effects of temperature on, and I think there's an immense amount of changes that we're all kind of aware of, you know, and air temperature is one of the things that has been monitored for a relatively long time that we can look at. So that is kind of the next step, is bringing in temperatures into this, you know, kind of long-term analysis that we've been performing, looking at the trends.
All right.
Okay. See, I don't have my glasses as a problem.
Oh, Eli, do you want to unmute yourself?
Ryan, there we go. Hopefully y'all can hear me. Just on the nutrient data, the North Coast Board's been collecting nutrient data in the Scott at multiple locations. Right now we're collecting at 7, but we did at one point collect at 9 since 2020. And so that data is available for folks who would like it. Just reach out to me. And then Erich, I was curious, for this data that you're collecting now real time, you've got a pretty impressive network. of stations. Will any of that be available to the public or agency partners over time, or is it available now? It'd be really valuable to be able to do, status and trends analysis with a lot of these data points.
Right. Yeah, the availability of the real-time data, that's what, so Eli was asking about fundamentally the availability of the real-time data that we're collecting. And, it's both the real-time data, Eli, and also, 20 probably of those stations are still the old, got to go and download them. So this is relatively new to us, and we're trying to catch up with ensuring the quality of the data, especially the discharge calculations before we distribute it, to be completely honest. So the hope is that as we get further into this year, that the real-time stations will be fully calibrated, and then they can be distributed. And I'm also kind of backfilling that with doing calculations offline and then distributing those as possible. So I'm hoping that we will have data available to managers and other collaborators as soon as possible.
Well,
and then just to follow up on that real quick, the North Coast Board is going to be deploying a telemetered sonde in the Scott at Young's Dam, just above that, this year. Hopefully next week I'll be out there doing that. So we'll have some data to contribute to.
All right, another sonde coming into the Scott. That's great.
Okay.
Well, Eric, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Of course.
And I usually take that. Yeah. And Eric mentioned all the hundreds of sensors they have out there, and that gets back to the that issue of a tremendous amount of data. That we have to figure out ways to to better share that when and where it's appropriate. So
Let me set this. Oh,